Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. StratGamer here, providing you with new gaming content about Anno 1800 today. And today, I want to share my top 10 tips and tricks for, let's say, beginners and intermediate players. You've been playing a few hours in Anno, um, and you don't know everything yet, but you also do know the basics. I hope this will be very useful. I will also create a follow-up video on my top 10 tips for the advanced players, so feel free to check that out too. But before we get started, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're into strategy games, simulation games, city building games, from Anno to Stronghold to Age of Empires and many others. That's exactly what I cover in this channel. So subscribe to never miss a new video and support me. Also, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Share what you hope to learn in this video, maybe a question that you still have, or another tip that you think I missed, or really anything else on your mind. I will do my best to answer each and every one of you. Okay, let's get started. The first tip I want to share is really how powerful the blueprint mode is. So as you can see here, you have blueprint mode off and blueprint mode on. And what is blueprint mode? Let's see. If I take some buildings and put them in blueprint, as you see, they won't have exactly the same color. They are sort of a lighter color. And what does it mean is they're placed on the map. I can't um, put some, and I can't put another building on top of them. It's blocked, but it hasn't cost me any resources. They're not being fed yet, and all of this. So it's really useful to prepare your city. You know, for example, at the beginning, if you don't have the wood yet and you're waiting for wood to come in, well, then just build, and then when the wood is ready, you press U, the hotkey for upgrade. As you can see now, I can start upgrading elements. It's also great, I feel, when you have a great template or a great layout that you like and you just want to reproduce it. Or when you're trying to prepare a layout, so you're not sure that your layout is gonna work. For example, let's check out, in the new world, you're creating a new island and you're not sure yet where to place elements. You can start, for example, something I usually do is I start putting my trade union anywhere. Then you can start putting your coffee plantations. And when you're happy with the whole design, maybe then I'll find out that this didn't work well like this, then I'll put it here or whatever it is. And when you're ready with the design, you can copy the whole thing, and you still haven't used any resources, right? So that's being great, and you put it where you actually want it, either still in blueprint mode, or at that point you can also switch off the blueprint mode, and it will just construct it. So that is not so that is tip number one. The blueprint mode enables you to plan your city in advance and not overspend on resources, on money, anything. Now, second element tip is for many players when you start, money is problem. You're often in the red, in negative. Well, as you can see here in sort of your end game, it won't be a problem. You'll have tons of money. But in the beginning of the game, I do agree it is a major problem. So what do you do? Well, tip number two is if you're in the red, just double the number of houses that you have. Why? Because in Anno 1800, there's no unemployment issues. Contrary to things like Caesar 3, for example, where you had to really balance how many people are employed and how much money you have, because unemployment was bringing you unhappiness. Here, it's not the case. So there's no downside to having more houses, except that they will ask to be fed more, right? But definitely it will bring you instantly more money. The tip number three is to not underestimate negative happiness or low happiness. As you can see here, for example, I'm trying to keep a happy population. Why? Well, the first element is an happy population will often start festivals, which will bring you a lot more money, can bring you resources, increase the happiness. So there's a lot of great things happening with festival. Another reason is when you have high happiness, there's very low chance of riots. And riots like fires and explosions are something that you want to avoid at all costs, obviously. Another bonus of having a high happiness is you can influence your um, production modifier. So for example, here, if I increase to 50% more, you'll see I'll get a worker happiness of -3. But if my happiness was, for example, at 33, now I get -3, I get to 30, which is still um, you know, enough to have my population very happy. And I do get 50% production bonus, so that's quite interesting. Now, so how do you get your population happy? Well, the main way is in the happiness tab here. Click on any houses, you go to the happiness tab, and you'll see different elements. You have the pollution that can bring either positive or negative happiness. Then the working condition, similarly, if you see, no, so for the um, scholars, doesn't really exist, but for any others, I could go up or down. And if I go up, so yeah, I don't have any population here. Sorry, let's take this one. So as you can see, if I increase the productivity, it goes down the happiness, but if I do the opposite, then it will go up. So you can play with that. Then the peace, if you add peace or not, can influence. Luxury goods, we're going to talk about that. Then news, you can have newspapers. If you use a lot of propaganda, it will bring negative happiness, but at the same time, some of the news article can bring your happiness up. And all of this together will give you your happiness number. And in terms of the luxury, you can see them here, if they're bringing you anything or not. So here I'm only giving luxury boots, which are giving +3, and none of the other elements. And of course, you can also have items changing that. So for example, here, the dean is bringing me an happiness of +10 as long as the university is in range. And this one +4 for the telephone, radio, so many different elements. Okay, now tip number 4. You are going to need several islands. Nobody really has an empire with only one island. You can win the game with only one island. I'm not saying it's impossible, but at the end of the day, if you want to expand your empire, that would mean several islands. It will also make the game a lot easier if you have several islands, because different islands will have different fertilities. You will also have less royal taxes if you spread your population over islands, etc. And here the tip, so tip number 4 is you'll need several islands. So don't wait until they're all taken. At the beginning of the game, it's usually very easy to sort of focus on your first island and forget about everything else. And then the AIs are taking over all the other islands and you're left with nothing. So my advice is take a few from the start as soon as you can. Take a few. And that goes for every region. Now, tip number 5. We talked earlier that in the beginning you're often in the red. One way to avoid that is to sell your sub to Ellie. Let's go to the old world. Where is Ellie? I think he's here.
To work with the lowest, yet answer only to God and the Queen. How many can say that?
So this is Ellie, the prison guard. His location on the map will depend on your seed. For me, it's here. Many maps is more there. Here it depends. Anyway, as you can see, he will buy soap for 340, uh,
Just how is your
384,
consul?
which is huge. So all your extra soap, just sell it to him for extra money easily at the beginning. Tip number 6, bigger is better. This can seem obvious, but overall, when you're choosing island, just take the biggest ones. You will need space, especially at the beginning. You don't want to have too many islands, so you will need big ones where you can do a lot of things. And it's especially true now with the Research Institute, because with the Research Institute, you can change the fertilities of your islands. So you can take the biggest ones, then change the fertilities, and have exactly the island that you wanted in a sense. If you don't know about the Research Institute, I suggest you check out my video on the topic that really explain everything about it. Um, and here's the link. Now, number 7 is again, especially at the beginning, you don't want to overproduce. And especially you don't want to overproduce your raw or intermediary materials because they will sort of be useless, right? At least if you overproduce an end material, um, like your soap, you can sell it. But if it's something in the middle, usually it's a lot harder to really get your money out of it. How do you not overproduce? Well, first you can look at production times. For example, let's look at this simple one. You have potato farms creating potatoes that are then used in the snap distillery to make snaps. The snap distillery produces good 30 seconds. So use one potato every 30 seconds, produce one snap. And it's the same for the potatoes. They produce one potato every 30 seconds. So you need basically the same number of these than you have of these. Obviously, I'm talking without any items, electricity, things like this. But at the beginning, it's really good to look at those production times to see how many do you need so you don't overproduce. Instead of looking here, you just look on the actual
Always
buildings.
harder with
So
someone at
for
your
example, on
shoulder.
this one, you will see processing time 15 seconds. So you know that you need uh, to produce the so you know that the raw materials that are used, in this case here, the wool and the fur, should also be sort of produced at this 15 seconds processing time if you want to not overproduce. And then the last way to look at that
Pity the
is,
workers. When I think of their dreary struggle, I know how fortunate I am.
and then the last way to look at that is with your internal production tab. And that is a lot more useful when the production chain becomes more complex. So for example, for many, the first complex one is steel beams, where you can have your iron mines which are at 15 seconds, but then your coal with charcoal kiln at 30, and then the furnace at 30, but then the steelwork at 45. So a lot of people now get lost there. So what you can do is go into your production tab, which you can access easily here. See, you have your production, storage, finance, population, and item. So let's look at the production, and here you can see for each item either in one island or in all your islands or in a few of your islands, um, what is produced and what is used. Let's look maybe this one. Uh, Sorry, I need to find some. For example, let's look at this one. You have two bars. One is the demand in blue and one is the supply in green. And you can see, for example, here I am supplying a lot more than what I need. And this is also because I've selected one island and this is using other islands, right? I'm not following my own advice here, but you can see that if you want to be perfect, you could try to get exactly the same number in supply than in um, demand. And then you also see that there's sort of two shades of colors, and it's for the current versus potential. What does it mean? Is currently in the island, I am producing 22 pigs per. Um, I'm producing. So what does it mean? It means right now I'm producing 26 pigs, but I could produce 113. Why don't I produce them? Either because they're already full or they are paused. And similarly, I could use in a recycle 73, but I'm only using 9, sorry. And why? Because again, the building that uses them are probably already full of pigs, well, full of pigs, or stopped. So that's number 7. Look at the production times, don't try to overproduce. Now, number 8 is you can also look at the production time, that one here, across several islands. For example, in the Arctic, where you may have a small island that's producing a lot of things, but then those things are used elsewhere. You may want to check several. Let's take a quick example. For example, coal. I'm producing a lot of coal in this island here. You can see 49. And why? Because I'm sending this coal to those plateaus here. So I can also select all these, so the reserve plus the 4 plateaus, to see if I'm still producing enough. And you can see I'm producing 49 for the 38, so that's enough. So don't hesitate, again, when you start to having several islands, to use this tip number 8. Now, tip number 9 and 10 are a bit outside of the game. Tip number 9 is you can check the wikis for some easy blueprints and templates. And then when you got them, you can use the copy tool here to replicate them instead of just building them all the time. Now let's take a quick look at the wiki and I will show you 2 of them. Okay, so the first one is the Anno fandom wiki. And you can see here we have the city layouts, but there's also production layouts. And for each of them, some examples that people have taken time to put on it. You can see the authors, um, how many buildings, usually a picture, sometimes the construction cost, description. And that can be very useful, right, to get started. And the second one is the Anno um, layout website from the German community, but there's also an English version, the Rory, that we are in right now. And you can see here for many, many elements. Um, let's take one. Let's take, for example, the production building artisans. For each of them, several combinations of good items and what you'll do with those items. For example, will you have a workforce advantage, extra good, etc., as well as layouts. Not for all of them, but almost all of them. You can see your trade union, the buildings, and the farms that you're putting. So don't hesitate to use those layouts when you're starting. Try a few of them. If you have great ones, don't hesitate to also add them to those wikis. Number 10, when you have a question, of course you can post it in the comments below, but also don't hesitate to use the subreddit Anno. It is very, very active. Many people there to help. And also probably many post already on your question. So don't hesitate to use it. It is a great community for all your questions. Now don't leave right just now. I have a final and bonus tips that is actually quite powerful. Let's get back into the game. Final basic tips is that your residences, when they evolve, their needs are changing completely. For example, when you start with your normal
Proper
resident,
job.
with your normal farmers, they need a market. But did you know that engineers, for
I am
example, don't need a
literally
market at all?
content.
So don't put when you're um, moving to a higher level. So your
I should be
artisans
honored.
are the first tier that don't need it. Your workers will still need the market, but your artisans, your engineers and investors don't need it. So you can delete it at that point, or you can um, not build it if you're even planning in advance. And then even more so, it's the same for everything else, you know. Things like the pub is not needed later on. But obviously in exchange, those higher tiers, like the engineers, are going to need something else. For example, be it for their happiness or for their normal needs. For example, an university here, or for the happiness, the bank that you can see here. So make sure that you do check out what is actually needed for each tier and not just keep your old buildings. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was my top 10 tips for beginners and intermediate players. Just to recap very quickly, the blueprint mode, use it as much as you can. If you're in the red, just build more houses. Third,
Know a few
d-
what's turned to factory work.
don't
Hammers,
underestimate
mangles, and
negative
chains.
happiness.
I'll stick with me side, thank you.
Fourth, you'll need several islands, so don't wait until they're all taken. Fifth, sell subs to Ellie. Sixth, bigger is better, especially now that you can change the fertilities, take the big islands. 7. Look at the production times and the production tab. And 8. You can also select several islands in your production times instead of just one. 9. Check out the wikis for easy blueprints and layouts that you can use, and then use the copy tool. And 10. Ask your question on the Reddit community. It's a great community. Okay, any basic tips and tricks that you think I missed that really help you, please do not hesitate to share in the comments. Feel free to also share your requests for future videos, and don't forget that I'm going to record very quickly another video around more advanced tips. And lastly, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another video and help support me for free. Thank you for watching.